Commander Talvin of the Catherian Empire sat motionless in the sterile white chamber, his four muscular arms trembling like leaves in a storm. The neural recording devices around him hummed with an electric buzz that seemed to pierce right through his skull. Three military historians sat across from him, their eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. They had been waiting for this moment for 3 long standard cycles. The veterans scarred. Carapace told stories of battles fought across distant star systems. Burns from plasma weapons crisscrossed his chest plates, and one of his compound eyes had been permanently damaged, leaving a milky white film over what once saw clearly. For 3 years, he had refused to speak about the human conflict that had turned the mighty Catherian war machine into scattered debris floating in the void of space. The medical facility where they sat was built into the core of a massive space station orbiting Kither Prime. Through the transparent aluminum windows, swirling storms of their home world painted the chamber in shifting blues and purples. But Talvin's attention was fixed on something far beyond the walls, something that existed only in his memories. "Begin when ready, Commander," said Chief Historian Mortal, his 6 fingers dancing across the recording crystal controls. The devices sparked to life, casting an eerie glow across the room. The Empire needs to understand what happened out there. Talvin's breathing was shallow and rapid. His secondary heart, the one that pumped coolant through his battle-enhanced organs, began beating faster. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a drum signaling the start of an execution. "We thought they were primitives," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 dead soldiers. New to the stars, barely capable of crude faster-than-light travel. Their jump drives were noisy, inefficient things that screamed across subspace like wounded animals. The Galactic Coalition had faced thousands of species over the centuries. We had crushed civilizations that had been building starships when these humans were still hitting rocks together. The historians leaned forward, their recording styluses ready. They had studied the official reports, the sanitized versions that Command had released to the public. But those documents spoke of tactical errors and equipment failures. They said nothing about the horror that lived behind Talvin's damaged eyes. "Humans seemed completely unremarkable," Talvin continued, his mandibles clicking in a nervous rhythm. "Their ships were smaller than our scouts, built from common metals and powered by fusion reactors that our children could have designed better. Their weapons were conventional projectile systems and basic energy cannons, nothing we hadn't seen a million times before." He paused, and one of his hands unconsciously traced a scar that ran from his shoulder to his elbow. "Our intelligence division spent weeks analyzing their technology. Every report came back the same: inferior materials, outdated designs, power systems that belonged in a museum. Command estimated a 3-day subjugation campaign. Admiral Kexmore even complained about the assignment, said it would be over so quickly that his crew wouldn't get proper combat experience." The room's temperature control system cycled on, creating a soft worry sound that seemed to make Talvin flinch. His compound eyes darted toward the noise before focusing again on that distant point in space and time. "We were so very wrong," he whispered, and the words seemed to drain something vital from him. "By the gods of the void, we were so completely, catastrophically wrong." The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle hum of the recording equipment and the soft sound of styluses moving across data tablets. Outside the windows, a cargo hauler drifted past, its hull scarred by micrometeorite impacts and years of hard service. It reminded Talvin of the human ships, small and battered but somehow still functional. The first engagement was near there. "Colony world of New Sol," he said, his voice growing stronger as if the act of speaking was giving him courage. "A beautiful planet, really, green and blue with 2 small moons. Their cities sparkled at night like clusters of stars. We had detailed scans of their defensive installations. 12 orbital platforms, maybe 40 patrol craft, and a small defensive fleet of 30 vessels." Talvin's hands clenched into fists. "Our battle group consisted of 300 ships of the line, including 2 dreadnoughts and the flagship Eternal Dominion. We had enough firepower to crack a planet's crust." The human colony should have surrendered the moment they detected our jump signatures. But they didn't, prompted Historian Mortal. No, Talvon's voice became distant again. They didn't. We expected immediate surrender when they saw our fleet materialize in their system. Standard procedure. Most civilizations take one look at a Catherian battle formation and start broadcasting surrender codes before we even open communications. His breathing became labored, as if the memory itself was suffocating him. Instead, we encountered something we had no classification for, something that would haunt my dreams for the rest of my days. Retraced, the human fleet numbered barely 30 ships, scattered across the orbital plane like tiny metal insects facing a swarm of giants. Talvin's compound eyes tracked each vessel through the tactical display that had been burned into his memory. Their largest ship was maybe half the size of a Catherian cruiser, and most looked like converted cargo haulers with weapons bolted onto their hulls. Admiral Kexmore had laughed when the scanning reports came in. The old warrior's booming voice had echoed across the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. As he studied the pathetic human formation, "This isn't a battle fleet," he had said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "It's a merchant convoy that got lost." The Admiral activated the wideband communications array, his voice carrying the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds. The message went out in 17 different languages, each one a demand for immediate and unconditional surrender. The translation protocols covered everything from the musical tones of the seraphim to the chemical signals of the Hive Collective. It was standard procedure, a courtesy really, before the inevitable destruction began. The human response came. Back in perfect Catherian, spoken with an accent that suggested the speaker had studied their language for years. The voice was calm, almost conversational, like someone discussing the weather over morning stimulants. "This is Captain Park of the new Soul Defense Force." The transmission began. "We have received your surrender demand." Admiral Kexmore had leaned forward in his command throne, expecting the usual pleading for mercy or desperate offers of tribute. Instead, what came next made every being on the bridge stop what they were doing. "We decline, not we refuse, or we will fight to the death, or even we spit in the face of your tyranny." Just a simple, polite decline, as if Captain Park was turning down an invitation to attend a boring dinner party. The words hung in the air like a challenge that nobody quite understood. How to respond to? Talvin remembered the confused silence that followed. His tactical officers looked at each other with expressions that asked the same question. Did the humans not understand what was happening? Were their translation protocols malfunctioning? Admiral Kexmore tried again, this time explaining in detail what would happen to their planet if they continued to resist. The response was the same voice. Still calm, still polite. "We understand your position, Admiral. Our answer remains the same. Decline." What happened next shattered every assumption the Catherian Empire held about warfare. The human ships didn't retreat to a safe distance or form defensive positions around their orbital stations. They didn't try to negotiate for more time or attempt to contact their government for instructions. Instead, it did something so unexpected that it took several seconds for the Catherian tactical computers to even process what was happening. They attacked immediately. 30 ships against 300, charging forward like meteors falling toward a planet's surface. Their formation broke apart as they accelerated, each vessel taking a different vector toward the massive Catherian fleet. There was no coordination, no apparent strategy, just individual ships diving toward certain death with their weapons blazing. The destroyer Soul Defender led the charge, its hull glowing red from the heat of maximum acceleration. Its weapons were already firing, sending streams of projectiles and energy beams toward the flagship's shields. The shots barely registered on the Eternal Dominion's defensive screens like raindrops hitting a mountain, but the little ship kept coming. Admiral Kexmore ordered the point defense systems to destroy the attacking vessel. But somehow the Soul Defender weaved through the incoming fire like it was dancing between the laser beams. Its pilot must have been insane, pulling acceleration. Forces that should have turned any living being into paste against the bulkheads. The destroyer hit the flagship's shields at ramming speed, and for a moment, the impossible happened. the massive energy barriers that could stop asteroid impacts, flickered and sparked as the small ship's hull vaporized against them. The sole defender died in a ball of superheated plasma, but its sacrifice created a gap in the shield matrix that lasted for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, as the destroyer's wreckage scattered into space, a transmission came. Through on all frequencies, the voice belonged to Commander Lee, the captain of the dying ship. And somehow he was still talking even as his vessel disintegrated around him. "Every ship you destroy takes time," the transmission said, crackling with static and interference. "Every minute we buy, more civilians evacuate. We can do this all day." The message was broadcast to the entire Catherian fleet, 300 ships receiving the same words at the same moment. But it wasn't a threat or a battle cry. Commander Lee spoke like he was explaining a simple fact. The way someone might mention that water flows downhill or that stars burn hydrogen. Historian Mortal interrupted the account, his stylus frozen. Above his data tablet, did they not understand they were facing complete annihilation? Surely their sensors could detect the firepower disparity. Talvin's 4 eyes met the historian's gaze, and for a moment, the weight of memory made him look like an old being carrying the ghosts of everyone he had failed to save. "That's what terrified us," he said quietly. They understood perfectly. Their scanners were crude but functional, knew exactly how outmatched they were, down to the last weapon and the final ship. They simply didn't care. After the first week of fighting, the Catherian forces had managed to capture several damaged human vessels drifting in the debris fields of shattered battles. Talvin remembered the anticipation among the intelligence officers as they prepared their interrogation chambers. Finally, they would get answers about human tactics, the locations of hidden supply bases, and fleet movement patterns. Command. Expected intelligence, Talvin's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, his 4 arms wrapping around his torso as if trying to hold himself together. Locations of hidden bases, fleet movements, weapon specifications, standard information, extraction protocols. Instead, we discovered something that broke our understanding of warfare completely. The commander stood from his chair, his reverse-jointed legs carrying him in small circles around the recording chamber. His hooves clicked against the metal floor in an irregular rhythm that spoke of deep anxiety. The historians noticed how he avoided looking directly at them, his compound eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of Kither Prime outside the windows. "The humans we captured weren't what we expected," he continued, his voice growing stronger as he moved. "Our first prisoner was a ship engineer named Kim Hanna. When our interrogation specialists accessed her personal files, they discovered she had been a primary school teacher just 6 months before the war began. She taught children basic mathematics and reading on a colony world called Harmony Ridge." Talvin paused near one of the windows, his reflection ghost-like against the starfield beyond. The next was a fighter pilot, Choi Minho. His background showed he had been studying art at the New Seoul Academy, specializing in sculpture. His final project before the war was a piece called Children of Tomorrow, statues of human youngsters playing in a garden. The historians exchanged glances. This wasn't the profile of a professional military force. These sounded like ordinary citizens who had been thrust into combat. "Every human we captured told the same story," Talvin said, his voice becoming more animated as painful memories surfaced. Shop owners who became gunship pilots, doctors who learned to operate heavy weapons, farmers who turned into tactical commanders. They weren't soldiers trained for war. They were people defending their homes who had picked up weapons for the first time in their lives. He turned back to face the recording devices, and the historians could see something breaking behind his damaged eyes. But the worst part, the thing that haunts my sleep cycles even now, was what they did to our wounded soldiers. Talvin's voice cracked like ice under pressure. "During the battle for the Kepler mining station, we lost a heavy cruiser to human torpedo bombers. The ship broke apart, but several of our crew survived in emergency pods. The humans could have left them to die in the vacuum of space. Standard military doctrine would have been to ignore enemy survivors and focus on the mission. Instead, they sent rescue ships." The recording chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the life support systems. Talvin's breathing had become irregular, and one of his hands unconsciously traced a scar that ran across his neck plates. The human medic who treated our survivors was named Yoon Gi-woo, he continued. A small female with gentle hands and eyes. That seemed to see right through your soul. She had converted a civilian hospital ship into a mobile medical unit, painted with red crosses that marked it as non-combatant under human war codes. Talvin began pacing again, his movements more agitated now. Dr. Yoon treated our soldiers with the same care she gave her own people. She repaired shattered carapaces, regenerated damaged organs, and saved hundreds of Catherian lives. Never once did she ask for information. Never once did she show hatred or anger toward the beings who were trying to destroy her world. Historian. Mordo looked confused, his stylus hovering over his data tablet. Surely this was advantageous for your forces. Having wounded soldiers return to service? You don't understand, Talvin turned sharply, his compound eyes blazing with an intensity that made the historians lean back in their chairs. They would heal our soldiers completely, nurse them back to perfect health, then do something that violated every principle of warfare we had ever known. He moved to the center of the room, his forearms gesturing as if trying to grasp something invisible. Before they released our people, the humans would show them images. Videos of human children playing in schoolyards, laughing as they chased each other around playground equipment, families sharing meals together, grandparents telling stories to wide-eyed youngsters, elderly humans tending gardens, their faces peaceful as they worked with growing plants. Talvin's voice became barely audible. They would show our soldiers concerts where human musicians played beautiful melodies, art galleries where creators displayed works that spoke of hope and dreams, libraries where scholars pursued knowledge, for the simple joy of learning. Then they would release our soldiers back to us. The commander stopped pacing and faced the historians directly. The message was crystal clear without a single word being spoken. This is what you're trying to destroy. These are the people we're protecting. This is the life we're fighting to preserve. His mandibles clicked rapidly, sign of extreme distress among his species. Our own soldiers began refusing orders. They would return from human captivity and simply put down their weapons. Requested transfers to non-combat positions. Others asked to be sent home. They couldn't fight an enemy that had shown them such kindness, that had revealed the beauty of what they were being asked to annihilate. Talvina's voice dropped to a whisper that barely registered on the recording devices. We were being defeated, not by superior firepower or advanced tactics, but by human compassion. They were winning the war by making us remember what we were fighting for and questioning whether it was worth destroying something so precious. The siege of Kepler Station was where everything changed forever. Talvin's voice became hollow, as he recalled that moment like someone speaking from the bottom of a deep well. The massive orbital facility hung in space like a wounded metal giant, its hull scarred by weeks of bombardment. Plasma burns streaked across its surface, and sections of the outer ring had been completely blown away, venting atmosphere and debris into the vacuum. We had them completely surrounded, Talvin said, his forearms trembling as the memories flooded back. 230 ships in a perfect sphere formation around the station. The shields were failing, flickering like dying stars. The evacuation transports couldn't break through our blockade. Victory was absolutely certain. The Catherian commander moved to the recording chamber's main display, activating a holographic projection that showed the tactical situation. The station appeared as a small blue dot, surrounded by hundreds of red markers representing the siege. Fleet, it looked hopeless, like a single candle flame surrounded by an ocean of darkness. Admiral Kexmore had given them one final ultimatum. Talvin continued, his compound eyes reflecting the hologram's light. Surrender in 10 standard minutes, or watch the station be reduced to scrap metal. We had plasma cannons locked onto every critical system. One command from the Admiral, and 50,000 civilians would die in the crossfire. The station's communication arrays had been damaged in the fighting, but somehow a single transmission managed to get through the interference. The voice that came across belonged to Engineer On Hyunwoo, speaking in that same calm tone that had become so familiar during the conflict. This is Chief Engineer On Hyunwoo of Kepler Station, the message began. Understand your position, Admiral Kexmore? However, I'm afraid we have a problem that changes everything. Talvin's breathing became unsteady as he remembered the conversation that followed. The human engineer explained that the station's main reactor was critically damaged from the siege. If it went into meltdown, the explosion would destroy not just the station, but also damage several Catherian ships in the inner blockade formation. But there was something else, Talvin said, his voice barely above a whisper, something that made what happened next even more incredible. The station wasn't just sheltering human civilians. During the previous months of fighting, they had taken in refugees from dozens of worlds, including families of captured Catherian soldiers. The commander's compound eyes closed as if trying to shut out the memory. Our own people were aboard that station. Wives and children of crew members who had been captured in earlier battles. The humans had given them refugee status, treated them like honored guests instead of enemy prisoners. Engineer on Hananwu's plan was simple in concept but impossible. In execution, someone needed to manually override the reactor's safety systems from inside the core chamber. The radiation levels in that section were already lethal, and they would only get worse as the emergency shutdown procedures began. Whoever went in would have maybe 10 minutes to complete the override before the radiation killed them. He volunteered immediately, Talvin said, his voice breaking. A single human against our entire siege fleet of 230 warships. His mission was to buy time for the civilian transports to escape, including the Catherian families, who had been given shelter. The tactical display showed the evacuation routes that would open up if the reactor could be stabilized. Dozens of small transport ships waited in the station's docking bays, packed with refugees from a dozen different species. Human children sat next to young Catherians, their different biologies united by the simple fact that they were all just trying to survive. We could have stopped him, Talvin admitted, his forehands clenching into fists. Our sensors tracked his movement through the station's corridors. We could have targeted the reactor chamber with precision weapons, could have made his mission impossible. We should have stopped him. But something about engineer on Hyanwu's calm determination made the entire siege fleet hesitate. The human moved through the radiation-flooded corridors like he was taking a leisurely walk through a garden. His life signs appeared on Catherian medical scanners, showing his body slowly breaking down as the invisible energy tore through his cells. He never hurried, Talvin said, wonder creeping into his voice. Never showed fear or panic. He just walked steadily toward the reactor core, humming a tune that our communication officers identified as a human lullaby. The override process took 8 minutes and 37 seconds. During that time, every ship in the siege fleet watched their sensors as one human being slowly died to save thousands of lives, including the lives of his enemies' families. As the radiation levels reached fatal intensity, Hyunwoo transmitted one final message. But instead of speaking to his own people or the civilian transports preparing to evacuate, he directed his words to the Catherian fleet that had been trying to kill him. Admiral Kexmore, this is engineer on Hyanwu. The transmission began, crackling with interference from the radiation storm. The reactor is stabilized. The evacuation routes are clear. Talvin's breathing became ragged as he remembered what came next. Then he said something that broke us completely. His voice was getting weaker, but he spoke directly to our fleet. I forgive you for what you had to do here. When this war ends, I hope our children can be friends. The transmission ended as engineer. On Hyanwu's life signs, flatlined on the medical scanners. He died alone in a chamber flooded with enough radiation to kill a dozen beings, having saved the lives of enemies who had been trying to destroy everything he loved. That human died saving our families alongside his own, Talvin whispered. Half my fleet defected that day. Ship after ship broke formation and jumped away, their crews refusing to continue fighting. We couldn't battle an enemy that loved us more than we loved ourselves. The silence that followed stretched for long. Minutes, broken only by the soft hum of the recording equipment and the distant sound of ships moving through the space lanes outside. The tactical hologram continued to glow, showing the moment when everything changed forever. The Coalition's defeat was inevitable after Kepler Station, spreading through the fleet like a virus that infected the very soul of their war machine. Talvin's voice barely carried across the recording chamber as he relived those final days. Ship after ship began broadcasting surrender codes, not to the humans, but to their own command structure. Entire battle groups simply powered down there weapons and drifted away from combat zones. It wasn't because humans had superior weapons or overwhelming numbers, Talvin said, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. Our technology was still more advanced, our ships still larger and more powerful. But we discovered something that shattered our will to fight completely. The commander moved to the chamber's central display, calling up tactical reports from the war's final weeks. The holographic projections showed Catherian fleets scattered across dozens of star systems, many of them refusing to engage human forces even when victory seemed certain. Admiral Kexmore tried to maintain order, Talvin continued, his compound eyes reflecting the dancing lights of the display. He court-martialed 12 ship captains for refusing direct orders. But you can't execute half your fleet, and that's how many were openly questioning the war. The breaking point came when the human government did something unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of pressing their advantage, they opened diplomatic channels with the scattered Catherian forces. Not with threats or demands for unconditional surrender, but with offers of medical aid for wounded soldiers and safe passage home for anyone who wanted to leave the conflict. They sent hospital ships to retrieve our damaged vessels, Talvin said, wonder still evident in his voice after all these years. Human medical teams worked alongside our own doctors to save Catherian lives. They didn't ask for prisoners or intelligence. They just wanted to help. The historian mortal looked up from his notes, stylus frozen above his data tablet. But surely your military command saw this as weakness? An opportunity to regroup and counterattack? Talvin's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. If it hadn't sounded so broken, that's what we thought at first. Admiral Kexmore ordered the remaining loyal ships to form a new battle line around the Proxima defense grid. We had fortifications there that could hold off any human assault for months. The display shifted to show the massive orbital weapons, platforms that guarded the approaches to Catherian space. Each station was the size of a small moon, bristling with enough firepower to reduce entire planets to cosmic dust. It should have been an impregnable fortress. The humans arrived 3 days later, Talvin continued. Not with a massive invasion fleet, but with a single ship, a converted passenger liner called the New Hope that had been turned into a mobile communication center. The vessel that appeared on the tactical display looked nothing like a warship. Its hull was painted white with enormous symbols in dozens of different languages, all carrying the same message: we come in peace. Instead of weapons, the ship carried massive communication arrays and broadcasting equipment. They opened channels to every ship in our defensive fleet, Talvin said, his voice becoming distant again. Not to demand surrender, but to broadcast something that changed everything. What the humans transmitted wasn't military intelligence or propaganda. Instead, they sent personal messages from the families of captured Catherian soldiers. Wives speaking about missing their husbands, children asking when their fathers would come home, elderly parents wondering if they would ever see their sons again. But the most devastating message came from our own people, Talvin whispered. The Catherian families who had been given refugee status on human worlds. They spoke about the kindness they had received, about human children who had shared their toys, about neighbors who had brought food when they were hungry. The commander's voice cracked as he remembered one particular transmission. A young Catherian female named Velthara had been captured with her infant larva during the early fighting. She appeared on screen holding her child, both of them healthy and well cared for. Behind her stood a human family that had taken them in, treating them like honored guests rather than enemy prisoners. She looked directly into the camera and said, "These humans have shown us more kindness than we showed them. They are not our enemies. They are our teachers." The effect was immediate and catastrophic for Catherian morale. Entire ships powered down their weapons systems and requested permission to surrender. Others simply jumped away, their crews unwilling. To fight people who had cared for their families with such compassion. Admiral Kexmore held out for 2 more days, Talvin said. Then he received a personal message from his own mate, who had been rescued by human forces after her transport was damaged in battle. She begged him to end the fighting to come home to their younglings who missed him. The final moment came when the Admiral himself walked onto the bridge of the New Hope to formally surrender. The human captain who received his weapon wasn't a hardened military officer, but a former school teacher named Captain Ji-Wan, who had volunteered for diplomatic service. She handed his sidearm back to him, Talvan said, his voice filled with amazement. Told him that surrender didn't mean humiliation, that his people would be treated with respect and dignity. Then she asked if he wanted to see his family. Talvan turned to face the historians directly, his damaged eyes meeting theirs with an intensity that made them lean back in their chairs. Humans don't fight like any species we've encountered in the galaxy. They don't fight for territory, resources, or dominance. They fight like parents protecting their children, and somehow they extended that protection to include us. He began listing the names that haunted his memories. Every human we met during the war, Captain Park, who politely declined our surrender demand. Engineer Kim, who had been a teacher. Medic Yoon, who saved our wounded engineer on who died protecting. Our families, they all shared the same terrifying quality. His mandibles clicked one final time, a sound like breaking crystal. They possessed an infinite capacity for hope, sacrifice, and love, even for their enemies. Even for beings who were trying to destroy everything they held dear. The recording crystals began powering down, their soft humming fading to silence. Outside the windows, the swirling storms of Kither Prime painted the chamber in shifting colors that seemed to reflect the emotional turmoil of the conversation. The greatest horror of fighting humanity isn't their capacity for violence, Talvan said, as the last of the recording equipment fell silent. It's their refusal to hate, their determination to save everyone, and their absolute certainty that peace is possible. He moved toward the chamber's exit, his hooves clicking against the metal floor with finality. They defeated us not through superior firepower, but through superior compassion. That is why we could never win. That's why we must never fight them again. The silence that followed was complete, broken only by the distant sounds of the space station's life support systems and the soft whisper of stellar wind against the hull. Talvan paused at the doorway. His forearms braced against the frame, as if he needed support to remain standing. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet that the historians had to strain to hear him. And that, he whispered, is why I can never forget what it means to be human. The chamber fell into darkness as the last of the recording systems shut down, leaving only the eternal dance of stars outside the windows and the memory of words that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The Induri Triclawed can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. S.